Hello Summoners and welcome back to another Pro Guides video. My name is Nathan Ng and today we'll be talking about the 5 sleeper OP picks and builds that you should be abusing for some free LP. You definitely know the popular OP picks and builds since they're all over social media, including our very own YouTube channel. But in this video, we'll be looking at some of the lesser known builds and picks today. We'll be starting things out with KAISA as a mid laner. The vast majority of Mordred players really try to make him work in his original role as a top laner, but he's just not as great there. He isn't awful, but rather just really the middle of the pack. He can rush Bramblevest and become unduelable in the early to mid game for most bruisers, but once those champions reach 3+ items, Mord quickly becomes irrelevant. It's simply not possible for most champions to deal with the hyper-scaling side laners like Yone, Camille, and Fiora. As a result, Mord top lane just falls right on the 50% line. You'll carry some games but be helpless in much others. But in mid lane, he has a much better time. The mid lane meta is pretty much entirely made up of 2 classes, Assassins and Mage, and Mord is built to demolish both of them. Assassins rely on their quick bursty trades in the mid lane, but Mord is too durable for all of that. If they go in for a trade, he can mitigate a good amount of it and then force them in for a longer fight, which he can easily win, especially post 6. In later team fights, when an assassin tries to dive onto a squishy target, you can instantly ult them away, rendering them completely useless. If you end up against a mage, you may think that their range poke will eventually shove you out in lane, but you can easily deal with the poke with the right setup. Just make sure that you run second wind and start with the Doran shield. That along with your W will easily allow you to sustain some poke that they throw out. Regardless of which class you're dealing with, neither can come close to being able to side lane against you later on into the game. You can easily shove them in and even dive them if you're strong enough. Now let's look at a build that you'll want for Mord mid. For your runes, run Conqueror, Triumph, Tenacity or Alacrity, Last Stand, Conditioning or Second Wind, and Revitalize with the stat runes being Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and either Armor or Magic Resistance. For your items, Doran's Ring is generally the best starter, but you can go with Doran's Shield against poke-heavy opponents. Work towards a Riftmaker, then grab either Merc Treads or Steel Caps. After that, you'll want Demonic Embrace, Nashor's Tooth, and Zhonya's. Your last item is up to you. Some good options are Rallies, Thornmail, and Spirit Visage. Part of what makes sleeper OP picks so successful is the fact that nobody plays them. Objectively speaking, they may not be better than or even as good as the most popular picks. But when your opponents don't really know how to play against them, you get that extra edge in a team fight. But that alone isn't enough to give you those wins in all of your solo queue games. You also need to have those skills to get those early leads and know how to use those leads to win your games. And that's exactly what we try to teach you at ProGuides.com. Our top tier coaches over at ProGuides.com can help you figure out exactly what you need to work on. They're available 24/7, so it's never really a bad time to come try one out. I promise, there's at least one that specializes in exactly what you're looking for. These guys have spent years reaching the top of the ladder, so why wouldn't you want to try stealing all their solo queue tips and tricks? All you have to do is click the link in the description. Now let's get back into the video. The next pick that we have for you is TEEMO Jungle. This one is definitely a bit more off the beaten path. It's not like TEEMO's kit makes him objectively the best possible jungler in the game. This is just more so the type of thing where it's just so off meta that people can go weeks or months without seeing it, and probably rightfully so, because he could turn invisible. As a result, they don't really know what to expect. That may seem cheesy, but in solo queue, anything goes. If choosing is what you have to do for free LP, then so be it. TEEMO's damage is surprisingly high, even in the early game. That, along with his blind preventing a lot of return damage from your opponent, means that you'll likely win any 1v1 against your opponents. To push this even further, I personally suggest you run Ignite. Why? You're already playing a cheese pick, so why not go all the way, right? Now, there's one glaring issue with TEEMO Jungle. Well, there's a lot, but he can certainly run pretty fast with this W, but he doesn't really have a gap closer. This can make ganking or forcing fights on the enemy jungler kind of tough, so they can basically just walk away. But there's a solution for that. The number one tactic that you're going to need to learn on TEEMO is using his passive effectively. When you see a lane TEEMO, you can always sort of guesstimate where he is. Even if he's not on the map, you can assume that he's stealthed somewhere where he was last seen farming. But since junglers are MIA for the majority of the game, your opponents won't have any real way to predict where you are. Use this to your advantage. If your opponent's second buffs are coming up, you can just go stealth in the bush near one and just kill them as soon as they start the camp. Another good spot is the bush next to raptors. Once the enemy jungler starts fighting them, just throw a shroom into the group and take them down. This isn't just limited to assassinating the enemy jungler. Say the enemy team has a good amount of wards in the river and you're finding it hard to pull off a gank. Have one of your lanes push all the way up to the enemy tower when their lane opponents go for a reset, and then stealth in the middle of the lane. When the enemies get back, your allies can engage a fight, and then you'll be right there ready to strike. Now let's take a look at your full build for this pick. For your runes, run Dark Harvest, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace, with the other runes being Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. For your items are the Ember Knife, then rush Nashor's Tooth. With that done, go for Sorcerer Shoes, Riftmaker, and either Zhonya's or Morello-Nomicon. Your last 2 items will be Void Staff and Rabadons. Now let's talk about Hecarim. For a really good portion of last season, Hecarim was a disgustingly overtuned champion. Whether he was full tank, full damage, or just some bruisery concoction between the two, he was able to trample over entire teams if he made it to the mid game with the lead. And with how strong his early game was, well, that was pretty much all the time. Not only was the champion itself really strong on his own, but he also synergized perfectly with Turbo Chem Tank. If you don't remember, there was a speed demon meta last season, where just about every single meta jungler just rushed Chem Tank and just forced fights. Riot reacted by nerfing him 3 times within a 4-patch span, and at the same time they hit Chem Tank. As a result, he fell off super hard. Fast forward to the present day and it's like we've come full circle. While he isn't nearly as popular as he was back then, Hecarim is in a really good spot right now. The bruisers and assassins that dominated the jungle in the last half of Season 11 have been pretty heavily nerfed in the past couple of months. You'll most commonly see Hecarim's building Divine Sunderer. That makes sense, right? The item is pretty darn strong and it lines up so well with his Q. That may be true, but just like last season, Hecarim actually does a lot better when you build Chem Tank on him. It both makes engaging fights easier and also makes you a lot more durable once you're in the middle of things. Let's take a look at the full build that you'll be running on him to dominate games. For your runes, run Phase Rush, Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, Water Walking, Eyeball Collection, and Ravenous Hunter, with the stat runes being Ability Haste, Adaptive Force, and Armor. For your items, start with a Hail Blade, then buy an early tier, and then build towards Bomby Cinder and Lucidity Boots. Upgrade Bombies to Chem Tank, then upgrade your tier to Manamune, which should hopefully be close to becoming Muramana. With your core done, your next item that you want is Dead Man's Plate. Your last 2 items are up to you, based on your game's needs. A standard tanky build is Sterix Gauge and Force of Nature. If you're doing really well, then you want to get more offensive power, you can go for Death Stance over Sterix. Honestly, as much as I like playing Hecarim myself, I don't really like playing against him. He just feels so incredibly oppressive. He's nearly impossible to peel and he does way too much damage for how tanky he is. When he gets a lead, it's like there's nothing that you can do if you don't have a Vayne on your team to shred him. That brings us to today's question of the day. What are some of the other champions that you feel is impossible to shut down if you don't have a specific counter? For me, the easy second answer is Riven. A good Riven with a lead in the mid game can 1v9 if your team doesn't really have a ton of CC to stop her from flipping all over the place. And that's just me. We want to hear from you. Let us know your answers in the comments down below. Now let's get back on topic. Next build that we'll be looking at is Crown of the Shattered Queen KAISA. Out of all the builds that you're going to try on today's list, this one is the least sleeper of them all. We generally try to find the rarest of rare for this list, but we decided to make an exception for this one. The thing is, while Crown KAISA is fairly common, the vast majority of KAISA players are still going for either Gale Force or Kraken Slayer. This remains true even in Plat Plus Elo, where players' builds tend to be much better. But look at these stats to see how much of an egregious mistake that is, and why we feel the need to make this PSA. The 2 standard ADC mythics have about a 50 to 51% win rate on KAISA. Crown, a massive 59% win rate. I would say to take stats with a grain of salt, but an 8 to 9% difference in win rates is way too big to overlook. This build is a must if you want to get the most out of KAISA. So what actually makes it so broken? Well, first of all, Crown is arguably the most broken item that League has ever seen. 75% damage reduction is just dumb, especially since the item still gives plenty of combat stats. But just because it's broken doesn't mean that you can just slap it onto every single champion in every single class. You need some AP ratios. KAISA falls into that category, and with the 11.24B macro patch, she got a buff to AP ratios on her passive. Plus her W now refunds even more of its cooldown once you evolve it. These 2 changes give huge value to this build that includes some AP in them. So let's look at the build in full. For your runes, you want to run Hail of Blades, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Magical Footwear, and Biscuit Delivery, with the stat runes being Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. For your items, start with the Doran's Blade, and then pick up an early tier, and then immediately work towards upgrading into that Manamune. After that, go for Nashor's Tooth, Berserker's Scream, and Crown of the Shattered Queen. The next couple of items are sorta up to you. For maximum damage, you can go for Rabdons and a Void Staff, and if you want some survivability, Zonius and Guardian Angel are options. If your team is a little bit AP heavy, you could hybridize your damage by going for Ginsu's and Phantom Dancer. Finishing off our list, we have Brand as a bot lane carry. Brand has pretty much always been played as a support, and while it's not exactly awful, it's not great either. He's definitely impressive in lane, but compared to other mage supports, he does have just a little bit of a fall off point. He has shorter range than other guys, and his only real CC is a relatively hard to land stun. So you're really just banking on providing a lot of damage in all-in team fights, since he lacks any type of utility. But being a support means that you have less budget to work with. By the time you reach Leandry's, Sorcerer's Shoes, and Shadow Flame, the enemy team likely has some magic resist. It can be a long time for a support to reach that 4th item. So long that it usually doesn't happen unless you're super fed. But as a carry, you'll be free to take up as much farm as you want all game long. Plus, you really don't have to worry about buying control wards, which just further delays things. It's pretty basic math from here. More income means more items, and more items mean more damage to kill people with in team fights. Now when you land that huge combo and start a chain reaction of passive explosions in a huge team fight, you'll actually have the items to pick up a pentakill. Let's look at the build that you'll want to go for. For your runes, run Dark Harvest, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Presence of Mind, and Coup de Grace, with the stat runes being double Adaptive Force and Armor. Free items start with the Doran's Ring and then build into Leandri's Anguish, Sorcerer's Shoes, and Shadow Flame. If the enemy team has a lot of beefy boys, go for a Demonic Embrace at this point. If not, pick up Azania's instead. After that, you'll grab Void Staff and then top off your build with the Rabadon's Death Cap. And that wraps things up for our sleeper builds that you're missing out on for patch 11.24b. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure you sub so you never miss out on our meta guides, and you're always in the loop on what the best picks are. Remember, let us know what champions you think are impossible to deal with once they get a lead down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of our community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.